with Les, and then over the years I've met him at various functions, including a presentation on Foundation given at Great Harwood by Les, which I thought was really interesting and covered the basics of what Foundation is all about. You'll know over the years I've been badgering everybody to make sure this club pays its $100 per head. But it was only recently in my Rotary career that giving to the Foundation did not at that time necessarily, upon joining Rotary, that you dig deep into your own personal pocket. Obviously, the more people that can do that, the better. But it was then advertised in the district that clubs can actually collectively put that $100 together, which our club has done traditionally over quite a number of years, until Colin, who was the then treasurer, decided to clear off to Abu Dhabi and not pay a penny. But fortunately, the following year, I think we paid double. So I think we're somewhere up near the top of clubs, certainly in the district, that pay our dues. So Les, I'm hoping, is going to explain to us all, in basic terms, in the next 30 minutes, about what it's all about. Les has been a Rotarian for many years, I'm not quite sure how long, but certainly longer than me. Over to you, Les. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I didn't expect to be performing in front of the camera this evening. Madam President, fellow members and guests, it's always difficult to know exactly what to say and do, because on the one hand I can quite easily upset you all. On the other hand, my task is to try and show you why Ian has been able to say what he's said. In other words, my commitment to Rotary Foundation. And what I propose to do is not use overheads and all the rest of it, but to try and show you why that commitment exists and what is going on with Rotary Foundation. There is no doubt that if we don't get our fingers out, we are not going to have sufficient money to provide for all the projects that people ask about. That's reality. There is a demand already for more grant dishing out than there is actually going in. Some districts in the world do not give a penny. Some clubs in this district do not give a penny. And that's deeply disturbing, because when Arch Club set this foundation up in 1917, what he said was, I want this endowment to be about doing good in the world. Now, I've had arguments with various Rotarians over the years, and my answer to all of them is very simple. Look at your badge. It says Rotary International, and therefore there shouldn't be a conflict about making donations that go to other countries in the world. But there are many Rotarians who will only donate to things going on in this country. That seems to me to defeat the whole object of belonging to an organisation which says one of our key purposes is to increase international understanding, peace and goodwill. And we usually, in many clubs, still have a toast at the end to Rotary International. So what's the problem? What is it that stops people giving? I think it currently runs at 60 million, something like that, earlier on today, for the Disasters Emergency Committee. 14 other charities. Now, why can they raise 60 million? What are they actually going to do that is different to what we can do? I ask the question the other way around. What is it that Rotary is doing that the disasters emergency people cannot do? There are currently, I think it's 24 different relief organisations in the Turkish part of the earthquake zone. Why on earth is UNICEF, the United Nations, at least 5 different versions of White Helmets, the actual rescue organisation. What are they all doing that's different? They're not supplementing each other in many cases, they're replicating each other. And how are they doing it? They're trying to make contacts. They're trying, the ordinary Turkish people are saying that their own government isn't organised enough to do it. But why are they doing that? Our organisation, with 1.25 million people across the world, is capable of reaching places that nobody else has been able to reach. Who was the first organisation into Myanmar, or Burma as it was, when there were floods? A lot of the Americans weren't allowed in because the government believed that by allowing the Americans in, they were going to spy and foment a lot of trouble. It was Rotary that got in. It was Rotary that helped deal with that flood. Because there were Rotarians nearby, there were Rotarians who could speak the language as well. They didn't have to pay translators. They didn't have to pay guards to go with them, people to monitor what they were doing. All those things at the cost of all these organisations. Lynn Jones, who is a psychologist, I hope I've got that the right way around, there's so many psychs, I'm not quite sure, but she is a psychologist who has worked for 30 odd years, maybe more, 40 years, in humanitarian aid, dealing with the psychological impact. And if you read any of her work, you will see that on the ground, the amount of time wasted trying to find people who can translate, to stop people identifying everybody with trauma, to stop telling people what it is that needs to be done. Why is all that important? Well, in the case of Myanmar, if you'd gone in trying to tell them, you'd have probably been locked up. The important thing is to get on the ground and do something about it. The United Nations was not capable of bringing peace of any description in Sri Lanka. Who was it that went in, despite all the trouble, and actually did injections in the troubled areas, in areas where even the government couldn't get? Those polio injections are so vital to our project. Rotary. Rotary managed to broker a peace deal between the warring factions in Sri Lanka, and as a result, in that area of northern Sri Lanka where they were suffering most, and it was most difficult to find a way of bringing peace, it was Rotary that brokered it. Rotary got in and did the injections for the children. How many lives were saved for that? And what are we paying for with the UN and UNICEF? Because they are based, most of them based in Western countries, there is great antipathy in many cases to these organisations. And that is a real problem. It is not a problem for us. We are everywhere. You yourselves in 2015 contributed to a big project in Nepal, which brought fresh water to people, and particularly women who were often neglected. And that is because that project was developed on the basis of somebody listening to other Rotarians in the district of Nepal that was hit so badly in Gorkha, which was the epicentre. Now, the point about that was, it was a project that was led by people's needs. not our perception of what should be done. And the reason we could deliver that was because those Rotarians from your own club, mine and Accrington, all of them were able to know there was a financial backup, that if money was needed, there was a source of money available. And why did they know that? Because Foundation spends £1 million a day. How many of the charities that you otherwise support are capable of impacting by £1 million a day? That's what Paul Harris achieved when he set up Rotary. It was to drive this notion of service above self. That means action. Service is not something that just requires money, it requires action. So how do you pair us when we can't get out to Sri Lanka, when we can't get out to Myanmar, or we can't go to the street gangs of Colombia? How do we do it? We partner with Rotarians everywhere else. Now, in the recent Rotary magazine, there are quite a few statistics, but in essence, a lot of people, I've done several talks in the past where people have said to me, yes, but you pay all this money, what do you get for it? Well, I think £1 million a day is a pretty good payback for what you put in. But I look at it a different way. The charities I choose are charities in this country, anyway, like the North West Air Ambulance, because they benefit everybody without exception. It does not matter. When I did 17 years fundraising for them as a volunteer, we brought an expectant mum back from Northern Ireland. There was no facility to do that in 1999. In fact, when I first started doing it, there was one helicopter and a couple of people who were medics, because the emergency response medics didn't even exist. The College of Emergency Medicine was only just emerging. We're benefiting now from having 3 helicopters, but the number of conversations I had about why do we need a helicopter? Very simply, it's getting access to places that ordinary paramedics cannot get to, and that applies now. Not everybody on the ambulances are the right qualifications in order to deal with emergency and distressing situations. And every penny has come from the people of the North West. There is no money from central government, which I particularly like, because if money comes from central government, you can guarantee that they will want to interfere. The RNLI, for example, was offered money at one stage, because that's always been voluntary, and they handed it back in 6 months. Said we don't want it. The level of bureaucratic interference. And when I was asked why isn't the air ambulance funded, I think it's brilliant that they're not funded. Because if the paramedics come along and say, we need this machine, or we need that, or that would make a difference, or that level of training, you get on and do it, without the massive delays that would otherwise be the case. And exactly the same applies with Rotary. If you want it, it's there. But it doesn't come from actual fresh air. In order to do these things, you have to have the foundation. And Arch Clump's vision, I mean, it's a massive endowment when you think of it, well over $1 billion now. But what an endowment to work with. But not only that, he said he wanted it to make a difference in the world, but he also wanted it to be sustainable. Now, how do you make something sustainable into the future? And this is where a lot of the posh people in Rotary, the higher ups, who keep preaching to us. But that is where the vision is. If you want to keep doing things, we've got to contribute. We've got to make some sort of sacrifice. And I'm always puzzled why people will put 10 quid into one box, but they won't put it into another. The RSPA, that's right, Royal Society for Protection of Animals, is a multi-million-pound funded operation. Why? Because people are passionate about dogs, or they're bloody daft about dogs, or whatever, cats. But that's the point. I mean, who else has left £2.5 million to a dog that will die in 2 years' time? Why? Why? I can't understand some of those things at all, because to me, some of the principles of Rotary underpin my thinking. Humanitarian assistance, not telling people what they have to have, not going in and saying, well, we'll do this for you. Not all the people are traumatised. Why are there 20-odd psychologists already in Turkey and Syria? Well, mostly Turkey. That doesn't make sense. There's a presumption that every natural disaster creates post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder did not exist in 1990. It's a creation, and it's not even fully agreed. It's not even, in fact, I don't think it's fully accepted on the list, international list of medicines, because it's not in itself an illness. It's not psychological illness. It's not mental health illness. It's something, well, everybody's going to be upset. Nobody disputes that, but the word trauma, widely used. And what are we doing about it? Look at what we did in, what year was it? Sri Lankan, the Indonesian tsunami. Sure. What did we do? We looked to the future. We bought a banana plantation that was redundant. We built houses. We were criticised because it was taking a while. Why was it criticised for taking a while? Because the negotiations required conversations between several lots of villagers, all of whom were going to share these houses, all of whom had their own view, some of whom were fishermen and wanted the boats. And then when they were all ready, these houses, there was a delay. What's the delay? Well, November is an auspicious month. That's all. And the people did not want these new houses handed over to them in this period, which meant a lot to them in terms of faith and beliefs.
Can I just pass a comment? I went out, I'm just trying to remember, the biggest problem when I was out there, I met our man on the ground, and the biggest issue was the MP.
Yes.
That was the biggest problem, but when I was absolutely horrified.
Their MP?
The guy, because the fishermen were going to move from where they were, on the beach basically, this MP, he had a big load of people and they were going to go to the village. Because that was a German...
they funded something.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And it was the MP who was... be careful what I say here, but he was the one who put his...
pain in the proverbial.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's horrendous.
And of course that means you've got to deal with that, otherwise all the work has gone. You've got to find a way through negotiation, and what's that other object of Rotary? Peace and reconciliation. And it's very, very difficult to do. Look at what else has come out of dealing with what were 6 areas of focus, but are now 7. For example, the Peace Scholars, a massive, the biggest peace operation anywhere in the world. And where are our people now? In 100 different organisations, but all of them in some way connected with those core values that we talk about, peace and understanding. They're in Geneva at the International Committee of the Red Cross, the World Health Organization, along with very, very high profile people from this area who went on scholarships and who now, well, one of them is, she's now, what do they call it, recorder in Kent. But in the meantime, for more than 10 years, she was fighting the corner of humanitarian human rights and particularly women who were suffering from the huge number of incidents where women were maltreated. And she, mum lives in Great Harwood. So even from our own local area, people were asking, why do you do that? Why are you putting Peace Scholars there? Well, we had somebody who was accepted at international level as an expert in all this. So, I'd just like to pick up some of the comments that have been made in the magazine. 295 projects last year, worth £6.5 million. That's a lot. And out of the 295, 138 of them are global projects, which means between them Rotarians are raising £30,000. The Peace organisation is something I'm very fond of because I've met so many of the Peace Fellows since all this was set up in 2002. Where does the money go when we do raise it? 86% on humanitarian aid. Why only 2% vocational training teams? Surely the answer should be that a lot more goes on that, so that in-country people are being trained and improved so that they themselves can become resilient without needing the import of the West. And it is broadly the West that does these things, although you'll have seen the Red Crescent in operation over the last few days in Turkey and Syria. That's very important. Otherwise, we are going to still be in the position of going out to places and say, well, we know how to do it. Shouldn't we put helping them become self-sufficient? Polio. Why have we got, I think, is it 6 clubs in the district who haven't given a penny to polio eradication? When I was 5, I was in hospital, seriously ill, and as I came out of that serious illness, I remember seeing the iron lungs on the landing and in the ward next to me. And a third of a minute, when I first became involved with polio was 1985, when we were making perfume, aftershave and all the rest of it, and going off to Blackpool to sell at Rotary National, as they were then, Rotary National Conferences. It sticks in my mind because my wife's yes, exactly, that was exactly my response. But it was, at that stage, I was involved with Rotaract, and we helped set up Rotaract, and this young lady did as well. and it was all about getting involved with Rotary. Right. Right to the very beginning, do you give money individually? Do you give it as a club, or do you give it nothing at all? Why should you give? Well, the recommendation is $100 per person. And at one time, and in fact, I think I'm right in saying in Japan, for definite, the minute you join Rotary, you pay $100 over as your personal commitment to all that Rotary does. Rather than be just a net receiver, which many people are. It's this personal commitment. And I've listened to club members say, I can't afford $100. That's a huge amount of money. £100 extra on top of my meals and my membership and so on. First of all, you don't need a meal. It's not required. And in any case, the cost of the meal is your choice. But why shouldn't you give that $100? What is it that is frightening people? Let me show you something. Some of you will remember these. Spread and save. It's not a sexual instruction. We'd better cut that bit off. There was also one, purple for polio. And there was another one with tomato sauce, all sponsored by Tiptree and Wilkins. Those are 20 pences. By the time that's full, there's usually about £63. That's not very much, really, is it? That $100 at the moment, according to the exchange rates, works out, where's my bit of paper? 20 pence a day. 20 pence.
It's $100 per year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
$20 per year. But the magic thing about all this is that if you put 20 pence, really, this is the best way, because most people like chocolate. That is what it costs you a week. And I'm sick of the people saying, I can't afford it. How many Rotarians cannot afford that bar of chocolate in a week? And if you do it like that, and then add in gifted at 25%, I mean, I worked it out at 20 because there has been talk about reducing that, but I don't think they'll dare. But 25%, that takes you up to £6 a month. It makes your £83 £104. So you're getting a donation of a bar of chocolate a week. The government gives you 25% of the value of all those bars of chocolate over the year, and it ends up as your $100. You don't need to be out of pocket. How much does a pint cost? If you go to the Dunkin' House, an arm and a leg. No, you either do that or you take your own bottle in with you, tucked down. Yeah. So, if you add all that together, what I'm trying to say is, there's nobody here really can turn around and say, I can't afford that. It's how you structure your savings. You save to go on, unless you're phenomenally wealthy, you save to go on holiday. You save for the £100 tickets to see your favourite stars. And £100 for a ticket for some of the stars is absolutely nothing. I forget what it is. Is it $7,000 or something to see Rihanna for 8 minutes?
Shoot Jordan and shoot the curtains.
So, what I'm trying to do really is just alert you to how much is achieved for very little, because that money is matched. It's matched by the Gates Foundation. It's matched by the World Fund. It's matched by global grants. And that organisation around foundation really means something. It means your money goes a lot further. And don't forget, most of it comes back into district designated funds in 3 years' time. Now, how many of your charities that you support give you your money back in 3 years? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Les.
Thank you.
I'm sure Les will take one or two questions, but not too long. But what I would like to just say, Les, to emphasise one of the points that you made earlier, quite a number of us were involved, as you rightly say, with the Nepal project, which was water and sanitation.
Yeah.
And that project started before the earthquake in Nepal. And as Les is trying to say, we've got 3 new members which wouldn't probably appreciate the fact that Rotary Foundation charity works so well because we deal with Rotarians. However, halfway through this Nepal project, dealing with Rotarians on the water project, the earthquake happened. And what followed was the Nepalese government saying any assistance coming into the country must go through the government. Well, we ignored that. We better strike that off the video as well. We ignored that and we continued to rebuild the school with classrooms dealing with the Rotarians. Had we gone to the government, well, who knows what would have happened in terms of the bill and in terms of the money. But there we are. So you've highlighted some really important things there, Les, that refreshes my mind, you know, not having to deal with translators and all this sort of psychologists, whoever, because you're dealing with people on the ground who understand all that. Sorry, thanks for that. I'm sure I'll take any...
I'd just like to say that you're preaching to the converted for most of us, that we have contributed as much as any club in the district over the years.
Yeah.
So we're all on board with this, lads, you know.
It's
But
nice
yeah,
to know.
what Ian said, you've highlighted a few things just to emphasise
Yeah.
how good it is.
Yeah. I think our district is pretty good with the international stuff. I mean, we've got a vocational training team already out, another one in the pipeline. We've done some remarkable stuff, all the way from dealing with drugs and crime to, as I said, peace scholars, global scholars.
Yeah.
I mean, all the global scholars are, they have to be in some way connected with humanitarian assistance, and now our 7 areas of focus. So we've got environmental scientists going out for a year to work. You know, these are the things that are going to increase the skill. And I think it does us good to remember how much we do. We do it because we care, not because, I mean, that's one of the dilemmas, isn't it? Getting publicity out, people are very, well, you know, I don't mind doing this, but why shouldn't we tell people? Because they ask, they want to know. How many times at Christmas when you do your collection, where's the money going? What are you doing with it?
Yeah.
And there is only one charity, for Rotary charity, and that's Foundation.